The ambient lighting of the celestial nexus cast a warm glow over the diplomatic reception hall, where representatives from across the galaxy mingled in what passed for casual conversation among civilizations. The space station, a marvel of engineering that housed the Galactic Council, rotated slowly against the backdrop of distant stars, its artificial gravity allowing beings of vastly different physiologies to interact comfortably. Cathvar the Bone Collector commanded attention wherever he moved through the crowd. His reputation preceded him into every room, every conversation, every hushed whisper that followed in his wake. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, his chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the soft lights, each scar and nick telling a story of survival and conquest. His 4 arms moved with fluid precision, gesturing as he spoke, while his compound eyes missed nothing in his surroundings. The crowd around him consisted of the galaxy's elite. Ambassador Thylex from the crystalline worlds, whose translucent form refracted light in mesmerizing patterns. General Mortax of the militaristic Corvan Empire, his scaled hide bearing the ritual scarification of 100 battles. The ethereal Veil Nari delegate, whose gaseous form shimmered within its containment suit. All of them hung on Kethvar's every word. The acid pools of Rex Prime stretch for kilometers, Kethvar was saying, his voice carrying the distinctive harmonic resonance of his species. The atmosphere itself burns through most protective gear within hours. The native fauna has evolved to not just survive in this environment, but to weaponize it. The Vrexian stalkers can project streams of concentrated acid with perfect accuracy across vast distances. The crowd murmured appreciatively. Vrex Prime was legendary even among Deathworlds, planets so hostile that most species couldn't survive there even with advanced technology. But that wasn't the real challenge, Cathvar continued, his mandibles clicking in what his species used to express satisfaction. Stalkers hunt in packs of 12 to 15. They communicate through subsonic pulses that travel through the acid pools, coordinating attacks across multiple kilometers. They can remain submerged in acid for days, waiting for prey to approach what appears to be solid ground. Ambassador Thylex's form brightened with interest. How does one even begin to hunt such creatures? Our atmospheric processes would fail within minutes on such a world. Kethvar's chest swelled with pride. Patience and preparation. I spent 3 months studying their migration patterns from orbital surveillance. I identified their primary hunting grounds, mapped their communication frequencies, and developed specialized equipment that could function in the acidic environment. The hunt itself took 4 days. He gestured to a small holocaster that projected images from his recent expedition. The assembled dignitaries watched in fascination as scenes of a hellish landscape unfolded before them. Acidic storms raged across twisted rock formations while pools of glowing green death bubbled and steamed. In the distance, shadowy forms moved with predatory grace through the toxic mists.
The key was understanding their pack mentality, Kethvar explained.
They never hunt alone, but they also never deviate from their established patterns. Once I isolated the pack leader, the others became predictable. I used modified plasma charges, detonated in sequence to drive them toward a natural choke point between 2 acid falls. The images showed the climactic moments of the hunt. Massive creatures, each the size of a small starship, with gleaming black carapaces and acid-dripping maws, cornered in a rocky canyon. Kethvar's form moved with deadly efficiency between the towering beasts, his weapons finding their marks with surgical precision. 17 stalkers. Kethvar announced as the final image showed him standing among the massive corpses. The largest pack kill ever recorded. The crowd erupted in appreciative sounds, clicks, whistles, harmonic resonances, and other expressions of admiration from dozens of different species. This was precisely the reaction Kethvar lived for. He had spent the last 50 years building his reputation as the galaxy's premier hunter, and moments like these validated every risk he had taken. General Mortax stepped forward, his scarred hide reflecting his respect. Your reputation grows with each hunt, Kethvar. The Corvan military has tried to establish training facilities on Vrex Prime for decades. We've lost 3 full battalions to the stalker packs. The difference, Kethvar replied with barely concealed smugness, is that I understand the prey. Most beings approach dangerous creatures as problems to be solved through force or technology. I approach them as the apex predator I am. Every creature, no matter how deadly, has patterns, weaknesses, instincts that can be exploited. The conversation continued to flow around him, with various delegates sharing their own encounters with dangerous wildlife from their home systems. None, of course, could compare to Kethvar's exploits. He had hunted the crystal bears of Theta Prime, whose diamond-hard claws could cut through starship hull plating. He had tracked the shadow wraiths of the umbral moons, creatures that existed partially outside normal space-time. His trophy collection was legendary, displayed in a private museum that attracted visitors from across the galaxy. As the evening progressed, Kethvar found himself holding court near one of the massive observation windows that offered a breathtaking view of space. The assembled group had grown to include some of the most influential beings in galactic politics: trade representatives, military commanders, scientific advisors, all drawn by his stories of conquest over the galaxy's most dangerous predators. The shadow wraiths were perhaps my most challenging hunt, he was saying, warming to his favorite subject. They don't exist entirely in our dimension, which makes conventional tracking impossible. You have to think in terms of probability cascades and dimensional intersections, rather than simple physical pursuit. The ethereal veil Nari delegate's form shimmered with curiosity. How does one kill something that isn't entirely present in our reality? Specialized equipment again, Kethvar replied. Phase-locked weaponry that can target dimensional anomalies. But more importantly, patience. The wraiths follow patterns that span multiple dimensions, but those patterns are predictable if you understand the mathematics involved. I spent 2 years working with quantum physicists to develop the necessary algorithms. He activated another holocaster, showing images of a hunt unlike any other. The prey was barely visible, existing as shifting shadows and half-glimpsed movements at the edge of perception. The environment was equally bizarre. A moon where gravity flowed in streams and solid matter phased in and out of existence. The kill required perfect timing, Kethvar explained. The wraiths become fully corporeal for exactly 3.7 seconds during their feeding cycle. One shot, perfectly placed, through a target that existed in 17 different dimensional states simultaneously. The crowd watched in mesmerized silence as the recording showed Kethvar making an impossible shot through what appeared to be empty air, his weapon discharge creating ripples in reality itself. A moment later, a creature of impossible beauty and terror materialized, its form shifting between states of matter before finally solidifying in death. Magnificent, breathed Ambassador Thylax.
The precision required must have been extraordinary.
It was, Kethvar agreed, his compound eyes gleaming with remembered triumph. But that's what separates the true hunter from mere killers.
Anyone can fire a weapon. It takes skill, intelligence, and understanding to become an apex predator. The conversations continued around him, each delegate eager to share their own tales or ask questions about his techniques. Kethvar basked in the attention, his ego swelling with each admiring comment. This was what he lived for: recognition from the galaxy's elite, acknowledgement of his status as the ultimate hunter. It was then that he noticed her. She sat quietly in a corner of the reception area, slightly apart from the main gathering. Small, even by the standards of bipedal species, she appeared almost fragile compared to the towering forms of most galactic representatives. Her skin was pale, her hair dark and cut in a practical style that suggested function over fashion. She wore a simple blue uniform with minimal decoration, very different from the elaborate ceremonial attire favored by most diplomats. What caught Kethvar's attention wasn't her appearance, but her demeanor. While every other being in the room seemed focused on the conversations around them, actively participating in the social dynamics of the gathering, she simply observed. Her posture was relaxed, almost casual, but her eyes, dark, alert eyes, took in everything with an intensity that reminded him uncomfortably of his own hunting instincts. She had been listening to his stories, he realized. Not obviously, not like the eager crowd that surrounded him, but with the kind of focused attention that suggested genuine interest rather than mere politeness. There was something about her stillness that set off warning signals he couldn't quite identify. Kethvar was in the middle of describing his hunt for the quantum tigers of Proxima Centauri when her voice cut through his narrative like a precision blade. "Impressive," she said quietly, her voice carrying despite its soft volume. Every conversation in the immediate area stopped as attention turned toward her. "But I have to ask, did any of them hunt back?" The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Kethvar's mandibles clicked in confusion as he turned to face her fully. Around them, the assembled delegates seemed to sense that something significant had just occurred, though none could have articulated exactly what. "I'm sorry?" Kethvar said, his harmonic voice carrying a note of uncertainty he hadn't felt in decades. The small human, for that's what she was, he could see now from her name tag and uniform markings, regarded him with those unsettling dark eyes. "Your hunts," she said, her tone remaining perfectly neutral. "You've described tracking and killing some of the galaxy's most dangerous predators. Impressive work, certainly. But I'm curious about the dynamic. Did any of these creatures actively hunt you in return?" Kethvar felt a flicker of irritation. The question seemed designed to diminish his achievements, to suggest that his hunts were somehow less than they appeared. "These were apex predators on their respective worlds," he said, his voice taking on a defensive edge. The Vrexian stalkers had never been successfully hunted by any being. The shadow wraiths were considered impossible prey by most xenobiologists. "Oh, I don't doubt they were dangerous," the human replied, and there was something in her tone that suggested layers of meaning beneath the simple words. "Dangerous animals often are. I'm just wondering about the intellectual challenge, whether any of them recognized you as a threat and actively tried to hunt you down in response." The distinction she was making began to penetrate Kethvar's consciousness, and with it came a growing unease. His hunts, magnificent as they were, had indeed been largely one-sided affairs. He stalked, tracked, and killed. His prey might fight when cornered, might defend themselves when attacked, but they didn't hunt back. "I'm Dr. Sarah Chen," the human continued, extending a hand in what he recognized as a greeting gesture among her species. "Xenobiology specialist, recently assigned to the Council's Integration Committee. I've been reviewing the files on various member species hunting traditions. Your reputation is quite remarkable, actually." Kethvar accepted the gesture, his large hand dwarfing her small one. Her grip was firm, confident, and there was something in the contact that reminded him of touching a coiled spring. Potential energy waiting for release. "Integration Committee?" he asked, latching on to the familiar territory of politics rather than examining the uncomfortable implications of her question. "Yes, Doctor," Chen replied, settling back into her chair with that same unnerving stillness. "We're preparing for humanity's formal introduction to galactic society. It's been fascinating studying how different species approach the concept of predation and hunting. Your records, in particular, have been quite educational." Something in her tone suggested that educational might not be entirely positive. Kethvar found himself studying her more intently, looking for the tells and signals he would normally use to assess potential threat levels. But her species was completely unknown to him, and their body language was alien enough that he couldn't interpret the subtle cues he relied upon. "Humanity has been classified as a developing species," Ambassador Thylex interjected, her crystalline form shifting as she joined the conversation. "We've maintained minimal contact to allow for natural cultural evolution." "Yes, Dr. Chen agreed. "Though I think you'll find that classification may need some revision." The way she said it sent a chill through Kethvar's exoskeleton, though he couldn't have explained why. There was nothing threatening in her words or manner, nothing overtly challenging, but something in her quiet confidence, in the way she sat so still while everyone else shifted and moved, triggered instincts he'd honed over 50 years of hunting. For the first time in his adult life, Kethvar the Bone Collector felt like prey. The reception continued around them, but Kethvar found his attention increasingly focused on the small human who had introduced herself as Dr. Sarah Chen. Her question about his prey hunting bag continued to resonate in his mind, creating an uncomfortable itch he couldn't quite scratch. He had faced down creatures that could melt steel with their breath, beings that existed partially outside reality itself, and yet this fragile-looking biped made him feel uncertain in a way he hadn't experienced since his youth. "Your interest in hunting customs is quite specific, Dr. Pan." "Chen," Kethvar said, attempting to regain control of the conversation. "Are humans particularly focused on predatory behavior?" Doctor Chen's expression remained neutral, but there was something in her eyes that might have been amusement. "You could say that. We're quite interested in understanding how different species approach the concept of apex predation. It's relevant to our integration process." General Mortak shifted his considerable bulk, his scarred hide rippling with what Kethvar recognized as curiosity. "I must admit, I know very little about humanity. Your species has been remarkably isolationist during your development period." "Not isolationist, Dr. Mann," Chen corrected gently. "Contained, for everyone's safety." The word contained hung in the air with implications that no one seemed quite ready to address. Kethvar felt his hunting instincts sharpening, the same hyper-awareness he experienced when tracking dangerous prey through hostile terrain. But the predator he was sensing wasn't in the environment around them. It was sitting calmly in a chair, discussing xenobiology with the polite demeanor of an academic. Ambassador Thylex's crystalline form shifted through several color phases, indicating deep thought. Contained suggests potential danger. But your classification indicates a relatively peaceful species undergoing normal technological development. Classifications can be misleading, Dr. Chen replied, especially when the classifiers don't have complete information. She reached into a small bag beside her chair and withdrew a portable data tablet. Its design clearly human in origin. The device was sleeker than most galactic standard equipment, with an interface that seemed to respond to thought as much as touch. I've been studying the hunting records of various species, she continued, her fingers moving across the tablet's surface with practiced efficiency. It's quite fascinating how different cultures approach the concept of apex predation. Most species seem to focus on physical superiority, technological advantage, or environmental adaptation.
As she spoke, holographic displays began to emerge from her tablet, showing comparative data charts and species profiles.
The information was comprehensive, detailed far beyond what most xenobiologists would have access to for a preliminary cultural study. The Corvan Empire, for instance, she said with a nod toward General Mortax, has built an entire military culture around individual combat prowess, honor through direct confrontation, strength through superior force. Very straightforward. General Mortax's scarred features showed approval. Combat reveals truth. The strong survive, the weak perish. It is the natural order. And the Veilnari approach predation through pure intellect, Dr. Chen continued, gesturing toward the ethereal delegate. Environmental manipulation, psychological warfare, turning prey's strengths against them. Elegant in its efficiency. The Veilnari's gaseous form shimmered with what might have been pleasure. The mind is the ultimate weapon. Physical force is crude, unreliable. Both valid approaches. Dr. 5. Chen acknowledged. And then there's Kethvar's methodology, patience, preparation, and precise understanding of prey behavior. Truly impressive. Despite the compliment, Kethvar felt increasingly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. There was something clinical about Dr. Chen's analysis, as if she was studying specimens rather than conversing with colleagues. You speak as though you're conducting a comprehensive survey, he said. How extensive is humanity's database on galactic species? For the first time, Dr. Chen's neutral expression shifted slightly. Not quite a smile, but something that suggested hidden knowledge. More extensive than you might expect. Humans are very good at gathering information, especially about potential threats. Threats? Ambassador Thylex's form flickered with concern. Surely you don't consider the council member species to be threatening to humanity? Not threatening, necessarily, Dr. Patterson, Chen replied. But it's important to understand the capabilities of those we'll be interacting with. Humans have a saying, know your neighbors. She touched her tablet again, and new displays appeared showing detailed anatomical charts, behavioral profiles, and what appeared to be combat assessments for various species. The level of detail was staggering, information that would have taken most species decades to compile through direct interaction. How did your species acquire such detailed information about us? General Mortax asked, his military training clearly alerting him to the intelligence-gathering implications. Observation, Dr. Chen said simply. Humans are very good at watching, learning, and remaining unnoticed while doing so. Kethvar studied the data displays, his compound eyes taking in details that others might miss. The information wasn't just comprehensive, it was tactical. Physiological weak points, behavioral patterns, psychological profiles that read like hunting guides. This wasn't academic research, it was reconnaissance. This level of detail suggests direct study, he said carefully. But humanity has had minimal contact with galactic civilization. Minimal official contact, Dr. Chen corrected. We've been quite active unofficially. The implications of that statement sent a ripple of unease through the assembled group. If humanity had been conducting covert observation and intelligence gathering for an extended period, it raised questions about their true technological capabilities and intentions. Are you saying humans have been spying on council species? Ambassador Thylex asked directly. I'm saying humans are naturally curious about our environment and those who inhabit it, Dr. Chen replied diplomatically. We prefer to understand situations thoroughly before committing to them. She closed the displays and set her tablet aside, returning her attention to Kethvar. Which brings me back to my original question about hunting dynamics. You see, humans have a very different relationship with the concept of being hunted. Different how? Kethvar asked, though he wasn't entirely sure he wanted to hear the answer. Most species, when they become aware they're being hunted, respond with either flight or defensive aggression. Fight or flight, as we call it. Very understandable, very natural. Doctor. Chen paused, her dark eyes meeting his compound ones with unsettling directness. Humans respond differently. How so? We hunt back. The simple statement carried weight that seemed to compress the air around them. General Mortax's scarred features showed confusion, while Ambassador Thylex's crystalline form cycled through several color phases of uncertainty. I'm not sure I understand the distinction, Kethvar said, though part of him was beginning to. Dr. Chen leaned back in her chair, that same unnatural stillness that had first caught his attention. When a human realizes they're being hunted, they don't just defend themselves or run away. They analyze their hunter, identify weaknesses, and systematically dismantle the threat. We turn the hunt around. That's merely defensive strategy, General Mortax said, but his tone suggested uncertainty. No, Dr. Chen replied quietly. Defensive strategy is reactive. What humans do is proactive counter-hunting. We become the predator in the relationship, regardless of who initiated the interaction. She reached for her tablet again, bringing up a new set of displays. These showed what appeared to be historical records, but not from any galactic database Kethvar recognized. Humans evolved on what we call a death world, she continued. A planet where virtually everything was trying to kill us. The environment, the weather, the plants, the other animals, everything. We didn't survive by becoming the strongest or the fastest or the most venomous. We survived by becoming the most effective killers. The historical displays showed scenes from Earth's past, primitive humans facing down massive predators with crude weapons, early civilizations developing increasingly sophisticated methods of warfare, technological advancement driven by the constant need to defend against or eliminate threats.
Every other species we've studied approaches hunting as a specialized activity, Dr. Pease,
Chen explained. Something done by specific individuals with particular skills for food or sport or cultural significance. Humans approach it as a fundamental survival trait that every member of the species must master. Kethvar stared at the displays, his hunting instincts now screaming warnings he could no longer ignore. The scenes showed humans not just defending against predators, but systematically hunting them to extinction. Species after species eliminated not through superior physical capabilities, but through relentless, intelligent pursuit. Your entire species hunts? Ambassador Thylex asked, her crystalline form flickering with what might have been fear. Every human is a potential predator, Doctor. Chen confirmed. It's not a specialized caste or trained profession. It's a basic survival trait. We don't have separate hunter and prey mindsets. We have hunter and hunter mindsets. But you're a xenobiology specialist, General Mortax pointed out. Surely you're not claiming to be personally dangerous.
Dr. Kell.
Chen's neutral expression didn't change, but something in her posture shifted almost imperceptibly. Kethvar's predator instincts, honed over 50 years of hunting the galaxy's most dangerous creatures, suddenly identified what had been bothering him about her stillness. She wasn't sitting quietly because she was passive or peaceful. She was sitting quietly because she was perfectly balanced, ready to move in any direction with explosive speed. Her stillness was the stillness of a coiled spring, a predator waiting for the optimal moment to strike. Dr. Chen, he said slowly, what was humanity's actual classification level? For the first time since the conversation began, Dr. Chen smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Omega Class Death World Apex Predator. Recommended for permanent quarantine. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the ambient sounds of the reception seemed to fade as the implications settled over the assembled delegates. Omega Class, Ambassador Thylex whispered. But that classification is theoretical. It's reserved for species that pose existential threats to galactic civilization. Yes, Dr. Rizuri. Chen agreed. The recommendation was that humanity be contained indefinitely, never allowed to develop space travel, never permitted to interact with other species. She paused, that unsettling smile still playing at the corners of her mouth. Obviously, that didn't work out as planned. Kethvar felt something he hadn't experienced in decades, genuine fear. Not the adrenaline rush of facing dangerous prey, but the cold realization that he might be completely outmatched. If humanity was classified as an Omega-class threat, how are you here? How were you permitted to develop interstellar capability? We weren't permitted.
Dr. Bree?
Chen replied simply. We achieved it anyway. And when the containment protocols failed, and Council surveillance detected our first interstellar vessels, someone had to decide what to do about us. Her smile widened slightly. They decided to try diplomacy instead of warfare. Why? General Mortax asked, his military mind clearly grappling with the strategic implications. Because the initial response fleet sent to reinforce the containment protocols didn't come back. The statement hung in the air, like a death sentence. Kethvar found his mind racing through the implications. If humanity had been capable of eliminating a Council enforcement fleet, their technological and military capabilities were far beyond what their developing species classification suggested. "You're saying humans destroyed a Council fleet?" Ambassador Thylex asked, her form flickering through rapid color changes that indicated extreme distress. "I'm saying the fleet was sent to contain a perceived threat," Dr. Chen replied diplomatically. "And humanity responded as humans do when they realize they're being hunted." She leaned forward slightly, her dark eyes reflecting the ambient lighting in a way that reminded Kethvar uncomfortably of the predators he'd spent his life hunting. "We hunted back." The reception hall had taken on a markedly different atmosphere. What had begun as casual diplomatic socializing now felt like a tense strategic briefing. Other delegates throughout the space had begun to notice the intensity of the conversation around Dr. Mill. Chen and several were discreetly moving closer to listen. Kethvar found himself reassessing everything he thought he understood about galactic politics. An Omega-class species achieving interstellar flight wasn't just unprecedented. It was the scenario that every containment protocol had been designed to prevent. The fact that they were now sitting at a diplomatic table instead of being reduced to radioactive dust suggested capabilities that defied every strategic model he knew. "The Council must have considered a full-scale response," General Mortax said, his scarred features showing the calculation of a military strategist. "Omega-class threats are treated as existential risks to galactic civilization." "They did consider it," Dr. Chen confirmed, her tone remaining conversational despite the gravity of what she was discussing. "In fact, they implemented it." Ambassador Thylex's crystalline form went completely transparent, a stress response Kethvar had never seen from her species before. "They what?" "Full containment protocol, Doctor," Chen continued, consulting her tablet with the casual air of someone reading a weather report. "Sterilization fleet, Class 7 bombardment authorization, complete planetary surface elimination. Very thorough planning." The implications crashed over the assembled delegates like a wave. The sterilization fleet represented the Council's ultimate response to existential threats. They were massive task forces designed to eliminate entire civilizations, reducing inhabited planets to lifeless rocks floating in space. The fact that such a fleet had been deployed against Earth meant that humanity's threat level had been assessed as terminal. "But you're here," Kethvar said, stating the obvious while his mind struggled to process the logical conclusions. "Yes," Dr. Chen agreed. "We're here." "What happened to the sterilization fleet?" Dr. Chen's neutral expression shifted slightly, showing what might have been genuine regret. "That's a complex question with a complex answer. The short version is that humans don't respond well to extinction-level threats. We tend to take them personally." She activated her tablet again, bringing up new displays that showed what appeared to be tactical analyses and after-action reports. The data was clearly from Council sources, but with human annotations and commentary added throughout. "The sterilization fleet was commanded by Admiral Zephix of the Hegemony Battle Corp," she continued. 47 vessels, including 3 Dreadnought-class world killers, the most powerful military force ever assembled by the Council at that time. General Mortax leaned forward, his military training compelling him to study the tactical information despite his growing unease. "That force could eliminate any known civilization. What could a single Deathworld species possibly do against such overwhelming firepower?" "Learn, Doctor," Chen replied simply. "Humans are extremely good at learning, especially under pressure." The displays showed the composition of the sterilization fleet in detail. Massive vessels bristling with weaponry capable of cracking planetary crusts, shields that could withstand the combined firepower of entire star systems, propulsion systems that allowed them to cross vast distances in matters of days. It was military power on a scale that most species couldn't even comprehend. "The fleet arrived in the Sol system with standard containment protocols," Dr. Chen continued. "Establish blockade, demand surrender, begin bombardment when surrender is refused. Very straightforward, very efficient." "And humans refused to surrender," Kethvar said, beginning to understand where this was leading. "Humans don't surrender, Dr. Kethvar," Chen corrected. "We adapt." She brought up new displays showing Earth's solar system during the period of the attempted sterilization. What Kethvar saw defied everything he thought he understood about technological development and military strategy. The human homeworld had been transformed into something that barely resembled a planet. Massive orbital installations surrounded Earth like a metallic shell, connected by streams of ships and material that flowed in patterns too complex to follow. The moon had been converted into what appeared to be a single enormous weapons platform, its surface bristling with defensive systems on a scale that rivaled the attacking fleet. In the 6 months between our detection and the fleet's arrival, Dr. Chen explained, humanity restructured our entire civilization around a single objective: survival. 6 months? Ambassador Thylex gasped.
You built those installations in 6 months? Humans work very efficiently when properly motivated, Dr. Chen replied.
Fear of extinction is excellent motivation. The tactical displays showed the engagement itself, and Kethvar found himself studying them with the fascination of a professional. The sterilization fleet had approached Earth with standard battle formations, expecting to face either primitive resistance or immediate surrender. Instead, they had encountered something that challenged every assumption about how warfare was supposed to work. The initial exchange lasted approximately 47 minutes, Dr. Pro, Chen said, narrating the tactical readouts. The fleet opened fire with standard planetary bombardment patterns, targeting major population centers and industrial facilities. The display showed streams of energy that could have melted continents striking Earth's defensive systems. But instead of the expected devastation, the planet's shields absorbed and redirected the attacks with impossible efficiency. Your defensive systems held? General Mortax asked, his tone showing professional respect despite his obvious concern. More than held, Dr. Goringling, Chen replied. They learned. Human defensive systems aren't just barriers, they're adaptive intelligence networks. Every attack pattern the fleet used was analyzed, catalogued, and countered in real time. The tactical readouts showed the progression of the battle, and Kethvar began to understand why the assembled delegates looked increasingly disturbed. The sterilization fleet's attacks had indeed been absorbed and countered, but the human response hadn't been merely defensive. You counterattacked, he said, watching the displays show Earth's defensive installations shifting configuration to become offensive weapons. We hunted back. Doctor, Chen corrected, using the same phrase that had started this entire conversation. The fleet came to eliminate us, so we eliminated them instead. The battle's conclusion was displayed in stark tactical detail. One by one, the massive vessels of the sterilization fleet had been systematically destroyed. Not through overwhelming firepower or superior numbers, but through precision strikes that exploited weaknesses that shouldn't have been apparent to a species that had never encountered those ship designs before. How? General Mortax asked, his military mind clearly struggling with the implications. How could a previously isolated species identify and exploit the tactical weaknesses of vessels they'd never seen before? Humans are very good at pattern recognition, Dr. Chen replied. And we're excellent at identifying structural weaknesses. It's part of how we approach hunting. She brought up detailed analyses of the destroyed vessels, showing how human weapons had targeted specific systems and structural points with surgical precision. The attacks hadn't been random bombardments. They had been calculated strikes designed to maximize damage while minimizing energy expenditure. You studied their ships while they were attacking you, Kethvar realized. You learned their weaknesses during combat. Humans learn very quickly when survival is at stake. Doctor, Chen confirmed. By the time the engagement ended, we understood Council military technology better than most Council species do. Ambassador Thylex's form flickered through several color phases before settling on a deep purple that Kethvar recognized as her species' expression of profound fear. The entire sterilization fleet was destroyed? 47 vessels eliminated with 0 human casualties. Doctor, Chen said matter-of-factly. Though we did lose several orbital installations that we considered acceptable losses, the casual way she discussed the destruction of the most powerful military force in galactic history sent chills through every delegate present. This wasn't boasting or exaggeration. This was a simple statement of fact, delivered with the same tone someone might use to discuss weather patterns. What happened next? Kethvar asked, though he suspected he already knew. The Council decided that humanity might be suitable for diplomatic integration after all. Dr. Pop. Chen replied with that unsettling smile. Apparently, the cost of containing us had exceeded acceptable parameters. So you're here as conquerors, General Mortax said, his military training finally providing him with a framework he could understand. Not at all, Dr. Chen replied, and for the first time, Kethvar thought he detected genuine surprise in her voice. We're here because humans are fundamentally social creatures. We prefer cooperation to conflict when possible. But you just described eliminating the most powerful military force in galactic history, Ambassador Thylex pointed out. They attacked us, Chen said simply. We responded proportionally. If they had approached with diplomatic intentions instead of sterilization protocols, we would have responded diplomatically. The distinction she was making gradually became clear to Kethvar. Humans weren't inherently aggressive. They were inherently responsive. They matched and exceeded whatever level of engagement they encountered, but they didn't necessarily initiate conflict. So humans are peaceful? He asked, though even as he said it, he knew the question was too simple. Humans are adaptive, Dr. Dane. Chen corrected. We respond to threats appropriately. If you approach us peacefully, we respond peacefully. If you approach us with hunting in mind, she left the sentence unfinished. But the implication was clear. Kethvar found himself thinking about his own hunting practices, his boastful descriptions of tracking and killing apex predators across the galaxy. For the first time, he considered what it might feel like to be the prey in such scenarios. Dr. Chen, he said slowly, when you asked me whether any of my prey hunted back, what exactly were you getting at? Her dark eyes met his compound ones with that same unsettling directness he'd noticed when she first spoke. I was wondering whether you'd ever experienced being hunted by something that understood what you were and decided you were a threat worth eliminating. The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that made Kethvar's exoskeleton itch with primitive warning signals. He had spent 50 years as the galaxy's premier hunter, but he was beginning to realize that he might have been operating in a very small pond. Are you saying that humans would consider me a threat? He asked carefully. I'm saying that humans would consider you interesting, Dr. Chen replied, and somehow that sounded infinitely more dangerous. The word interesting seemed to echo in the reception hall long after Dr. Chen had spoken it. Kethvar found himself analyzing the tone, the context, the subtle implications buried within what should have been a simple adjective. In his experience, when a predator found something interesting, it usually meant they were evaluating it as potential prey. Interesting in what way? He asked, though part of him dreaded the answer. Dr. Chen tilted her head slightly, a gesture that seemed casual but reminded Kethvar of the way certain predators studied their quarry before attacking. You've built an impressive reputation as a hunter, Kethvar. Your methods are sophisticated, your success rate is remarkable, and your prey selection shows excellent judgment. From a xenobiological perspective, you represent a fascinating case study in cross-species predatory adaptation. A case study, he repeated, the clinical terminology making his mandibles click with nervous tension. Absolutely. You see, most hunters we've observed fall into predictable categories. They rely primarily on physical superiority, technological advantage, or environmental factors. You're different. You study your prey, adapt your methods, show genuine strategic thinking. It's quite admirable. The praise felt hollow, carrying undertones that suggested she was evaluating him the same way he might evaluate a particularly clever prey species. Kethvar realized that for the first time in his adult life, he was experiencing what it felt like to be hunted by something that understood hunting better than he did. You speak as though you've been studying me specifically, he said, his voice carefully controlled. Not just you, Doctor, Chen replied, consulting her tablet again. We've been studying all the notable hunters in galactic civilization. It's part of our integration research. Understanding how different species approach predation helps us understand their fundamental psychology. She brought up new displays, and Kethvar felt his exoskeleton chill as he saw detailed files on dozens of hunters from across the galaxy. Each file contained comprehensive behavioral analyses, psychological profiles, and what appeared to be tactical assessments. His own file was prominently displayed, thick with data that should have been impossible for humans to collect. How long have you been watching us? General Mortax asked, his scarred features showing the calculation of someone reassessing every assumption they'd ever made about galactic security. Humans have been observing galactic civilization for approximately 70 standard years, Dr. Chen replied casually. We're naturally curious about our environment, and when we developed interstellar capability, we wanted to understand what we were dealing with before making contact. 70 years? Ambassador Thylex's crystalline form flickered with shock, but our sensors never detected any human presence in council space. Humans are very good at not being detected when we don't want to be, Dr. Chen said with that unsettling smile. Stealth technology was one of our early priorities. When you're studying potentially hostile species, it's important to remain unobserved. Kethvar studied his own file on her display, noting details that should have been private. observations that could only have come from direct surveillance. Hunting patterns, preferred environments, equipment specifications, even psychological analyses of his motivations and decision-making processes. It was comprehensive, to a degree that made him feel exposed, vulnerable in ways he hadn't experienced since childhood. "This level of observation suggests you've been watching us for decades," he said, a growing suspicion forming in his mind. "Some of these details could only have been gathered through direct observation of my hunts."
Correct, Doctor.
Chen confirmed without hesitation. "Human observation teams have documented your hunting activities for the past 15 years. Your techniques are quite innovative, actually. We've learned a great deal from studying your methods." The casual admission sent a wave of shock through the assembled delegates. The implication was staggering. Humans had been conducting covert surveillance operations in Council space for decades, gathering intelligence on everything from military capabilities to individual behavioral patterns. "You've been spying on us for 70 years, General Mortak said, his military training finally providing him with a framework for understanding the situation. "This entire conversation is an intelligence operation, not spying," Dr. Chen corrected gently. "Researching. There's a significant difference in intent and methodology." "The practical difference being what exactly?" Kethvar asked, his hunter's instincts now screaming warnings about the true nature of this interaction. "Spying implies hostile intent and information gathering for aggressive purposes," Chen explained. "Research implies knowledge gathering for understanding and potential cooperation. Humans prefer cooperation when possible. But you're prepared for conflict if cooperation isn't possible," Ambassador Thylex said, her form cycling through nervous color changes. "Humans are always prepared for conflict," Dr. Chen replied matter-of-factly. "It's one of the fundamental survival traits that allowed us to become the apex predator on a death world. But preparation for conflict doesn't mean preference for it." She brought up new displays showing what appeared to be comprehensive strategic analyses of every major council species. Military capabilities, economic structures, political systems, cultural weaknesses, information compiled with the thoroughness of a species preparing for either integration or conquest. "These files suggest you've been preparing for much more than diplomatic integration," Kethvar observed, studying tactical assessments that read like military intelligence briefings. "Humans prepare for all possibilities, Dr. Ri," Chen explained. "We've learned that survival often depends on understanding every potential scenario and having plans for each of them, including scenarios where diplomacy fails," General Mortak said, his scarred features showing the grim recognition of someone who understood military planning. "Especially scenarios where diplomacy fails," Dr. Chen confirmed. "Humans have a saying, hope for the best, plan for the worst. It's served us well throughout our evolutionary history." Kethvar found himself studying the human with growing fascination and dread. She sat there calmly discussing intelligence operations and military contingencies with the casual air of someone discussing meal plans. But beneath her relaxed demeanor, he could sense the same coiled readiness he'd noticed when she first spoke. The predator's patience of something absolutely confident in its ability to handle any threat. "Dr. Chen," he said slowly, "when you asked whether any of my prey had hunted back, you already knew the answer, didn't you?" "I knew that none of your documented hunts involved prey that actively pursued counter-hunting strategies," she replied. "Your success rate suggested that you'd never faced genuine opposition from something that understood what you were and decided to eliminate you as a threat."
"And humans would provide that opposition?" "Humans specialize in that opposition," she corrected. "It's what we do."
"When something hunts us, we study it, understand it, and then we hunt it more effectively than it hunted us." The clinical way she discussed the process of counter-hunting made Kethvar's exoskeleton itch with primitive fear responses. He was beginning to understand that his conversation with Dr. Chen wasn't just a diplomatic exchange, it was a demonstration of exactly how humans approached potential threats. "You're demonstrating your capabilities," he realized. "This entire conversation is you showing us how thoroughly you've studied and understood us." "Partially, Doctor," Chen agreed. "It's important that Council species understand what they're dealing with when they interact with humanity. Misunderstandings can lead to tragic outcomes for everyone involved. Like the sterilization fleet," Ambassador Thylex said, her crystalline form showing deep purple fear responses. "Like the sterilization fleet," Dr. Chen confirmed. "If the Council had approached us diplomatically from the beginning, 47 ships and their crews would still be intact. But they chose to hunt us instead, so we responded appropriately."
The matter-of-fact way she discussed the destruction of the most powerful military force in galactic history drove home the reality of what they were dealing with. Humans weren't just another species seeking integration. They were apex predators.
They were PASIC scared to the discretion of this intention read by this transpiral precision.
What do you want from us? Kethvar asked directly, abandoning diplomatic subtlety. Cooperation, Dr. Carey. Chen replied immediately. Humans are social creatures. We prefer to work with others rather than against them. But that cooperation must be based on mutual understanding and respect. And if that understanding and respect aren't forthcoming, Dr. Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her posture shifted almost imperceptibly. Kethvar's predator instincts identified it immediately, the subtle tension of a hunter preparing to strike. Then humans will respond as humans always respond to threats, she said quietly. We'll adapt, we'll learn, and we'll hunt back more effectively than we were hunted. The silence that followed was profound. Every delegate present seemed to be processing the implications of what they'd just heard. Humanity wasn't seeking integration as supplicants or junior partners. They were demanding recognition as equals, backed by demonstrated capability to enforce that demand. There's something I need to ask, Kethvar said finally, his voice carefully controlled. How many humans are there? Dr. Chen consulted her tablet briefly before responding. Current population of Sol System and established colonies is approximately 12 billion individuals. 12 billion apex predators, General Mortak said, the military implications clearly dawning on him. 12 billion humans, Dr. Chen corrected, most of whom prefer peaceful cooperation to conflict, but all of whom share the fundamental survival traits that allowed humanity to reach the top of the food chain on Earth. Kethvar felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's environmental systems. He had spent 50 years believing himself to be the galaxy's premier hunter, but he was beginning to realize that he had been operating in a universe where true apex predators had been deliberately kept hidden from view. Dr. Chen, he said slowly, what happens now? Now we find out whether the galaxy is ready for humans to take their place in galactic civilization, she replied. And whether galactic civilization is ready to coexist with a species that evolved to survive by being better at hunting than anything that might hunt them. Her dark eyes met his compound ones with that same unsettling directness, and Kethvar finally understood what had been bothering him about her stillness from the very beginning. She hadn't been sitting quietly because she was passive. She had been sitting quietly because she was hunting, and now the hunt was over. The days following Dr. Chen's revelation transformed the celestial nexus in ways that no one could have anticipated. Word of humanity's true nature spread through the galactic diplomatic community like a quantum cascade, triggering emergency sessions, classified briefings, and urgent communications with home governments across council space. Kethvar found himself at the center of a storm he couldn't have imagined. His reputation as the galaxy's premier hunter, which had been his source of pride and identity for 50 years, had become something entirely different overnight. He was no longer the apex predator he'd believed himself to be. He was a case study in how humans understood and categorized potential threats. 3 days after the reception, he received a formal invitation to Dr. Chen's temporary quarters in the diplomatic section. The message was polite, professional, and carried undertones that suggested it wasn't really optional. When he arrived at the specified time, he found her in what appeared to be a standard council diplomatic suite, but which had been subtly modified with equipment he didn't recognize. Thank you for coming, Kethvar, Dr. Chen said, gesturing him toward a chair that had been adjusted to accommodate his physiology. I thought it might be useful to continue our conversation in a more private setting. The room felt different from their previous interaction. Where the reception had been public, performative, this felt intimate and focused. Kethvar realized that Dr. Chen had been putting on a demonstration for the assembled delegates, but now he was getting something closer to the real conversation. I've been thinking about what you said, he began, settling into the chair with careful attention to his posture. His hunting instincts were still active, still analyzing potential threats and escape routes, but they were also registering something new. Genuine curiosity about a superior predator. About hunting back, Dr. Chen said, nodding. It's a concept that most species struggle with initially. The idea that the act of hunting someone might trigger them to become a more effective hunter in response. She had her tablet with her, as always, but this time the displays she brought up were different. Instead of clinical analyses and tactical assessments, these showed what appeared to be educational materials, charts, diagrams, and theoretical frameworks. I want to understand, Kethvar said honestly. I've spent my entire adult life believing I understood what it meant to be an apex predator. Now I discover that there's an entire species of beings who approach predation in ways I never even considered. Doctor. Chen's expression showed something that might have been approval. That's exactly the right response. Recognition that there's more to learn is the first step toward real understanding. She activated a holographic display that showed a three-dimensional model of what appeared to be Earth's evolutionary tree, but with modifications and annotations that highlighted specific development paths. Most species evolve predatory capabilities in response to their environment, she explained. They become faster, stronger, more venomous, better camouflaged. They develop specialized hunting tools, claws, fangs, sensory organs. Physical adaptation to environmental pressures. The display showed various Earth species and their evolutionary paths, highlighting the conventional progression from basic survival to specialized predation. Humans evolved differently. Dr. Chen continued, our primary adaptation wasn't physical, it was cognitive. We didn't become better hunters by developing better natural weapons. We became better hunters by becoming better at understanding hunting itself. The display shifted to show human evolutionary development, highlighting the growth of brain capacity and the development of tool use, social cooperation, and strategic thinking. Meta-hunting, Kethvar said. The concept beginning to crystallize in his mind. You learned how to learn about hunting. Exactly, Dr. Chen confirmed. While other species were developing specialized hunting techniques, humans were developing the ability to understand and counter any hunting technique we encountered. She brought up new displays showing human military history, but framed in terms of hunting and counter-hunting dynamics. Warfare, she explained, was simply hunting scaled up to the species level, and humans had spent millennia perfecting the art of hunting other hunters. Every military conflict in human history has been essentially a hunting exercise, she continued. One group trying to eliminate another, with both sides constantly adapting their techniques based on what their opponents were doing. The side that learned faster and adapted more effectively was the side that survived. Kethvar studied the historical examples, recognizing patterns that paralleled his own hunting experiences, but scaled to a level that encompassed entire civilizations. The progression was clear. Humans had spent thousands of years learning how to hunt increasingly sophisticated prey, including prey that hunted back. This is why you were classified as Omega class, he realized. Not because you were physically dangerous, but because you were cognitively dangerous.
Physical danger is manageable, Doctor.
Chen agreed. You can build bigger weapons, stronger shields, faster ships. Cognitive danger is exponential. A species that learns how to learn about hunting can theoretically counter any hunting technique ever developed. She paused, her dark eyes studying his compound ones with that same unsettling directness he'd noticed at the reception. Which brings us to why I wanted to speak with you privately. Kethvar felt his exoskeleton prickle with nervous energy.
Which is?
Humans are naturally curious about superior examples of any skill set we encounter. Your hunting techniques, your success rate, your ability to adapt to different prey types, it's all quite impressive by galactic standards. But not by human standards, he said, beginning to understand where this was leading. By human standards, you're an interesting intermediate case study, Dr. Byritz added. Chen replied with clinical honesty. Your methods show genuine sophistication, but they're still fundamentally reactive rather than proactive. You adapt to your prey, but you don't force your prey to adapt to you. And humans do. Humans specialize in forcing adaptation. We don't just hunt our prey, we force our prey to evolve in response to our hunting pressure, then we adapt to their evolutionary responses faster than they can implement them. The concept was staggering. Humans didn't just hunt individual creatures, they hunted entire species' evolutionary strategies, forcing them to change and then countering those changes in an endless spiral of predatory escalation. This is what happened to the sterilization fleet, Kethvar realized. You forced them to adapt their tactics in real time, then you adapted to their adaptations faster than they could implement them. The fleet was operating according to standard protocols, Chen confirmed. Overwhelmed with superior firepower, maintain tactical distance, minimize risk through technological advantage. When those protocols failed, they had to improvise. And humans are better at improvisation. Humans have been improvising survival strategies for millions of years. It's what we do. Dr. Chen brought up tactical analyses of the sterilization fleet engagement, but this time the focus was on adaptation cycles rather than pure military capability. The display showed how human forces had forced the Council fleet into increasingly desperate tactical modifications, each of which was counted before it could be fully implemented. The engagement lasted 47 minutes, she said, but the fleet was effectively defeated in the first 12 minutes. Everything after that was just humans demonstrating their ability to counter adaptations in real time. Kethvar studied the tactical progression, recognizing the same patterns he'd seen in his own hunts but compressed into impossibly rapid cycles. The humans hadn't just won the engagement, they had forced their opponents to exhaust their adaptive capacity while barely beginning to utilize their own. "What do you want from me, Dr. Chen?" he asked directly, abandoning any pretense of diplomatic subtlety. "I want to offer you an opportunity," she replied. "Humans are always interested in learning new techniques, especially from individuals who show genuine skill. Your hunting methods could be valuable additions to our understanding of predatory dynamics." The offer hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that Kethvar was only beginning to understand. Working with humans would mean abandoning his status as the galaxy's premier hunter and accepting a role as something closer to a research subject or junior partner. And in return?
In return, you get to learn how apex predators actually hunt. Dr. Satamad,
Chen said simply. Real apex predators, not just the most successful hunters in a limited environment. She brought up new displays showing human hunting techniques applied to various scenarios. The sophistication was breathtaking. Methods that incorporated psychological warfare, environmental manipulation, technological innovation, and social dynamics in ways that made his own techniques look primitive by comparison. "These are your teaching materials?"
he asked, studying techniques that seemed to blur the line between hunting and warfare.
"Basic curriculum," Dr. Chen confirmed. "Every human child learns these fundamentals as part of their education. Survival skills, tactical thinking, resource optimization, threat assessment, standard preparation for living in a universe where everything might be trying to kill you." The casual way she described training children in techniques that surpassed his lifetime of experience drove home the reality of what humanity represented. They weren't just apex predators. They were a species that mass-produced apex predators as a basic survival strategy. "What happened to the galaxy's other apex predators?" Kethvar asked, a suspicion forming in his mind. "The species that were legendary hunters before humans arrived?" Dr. Chen's expression showed what might have been sympathy. "Most of them are in the same position you're in now, trying to decide whether to learn new techniques or maintain their existing status in a universe that's suddenly much more complex than they realized. And those who chose to maintain their existing status are discovering that their hunting grounds have become significantly more challenging." The implication was clear. Humanity's arrival had changed the fundamental dynamics of predation throughout galactic civilization. Species that had considered themselves apex predators were finding themselves relegated to secondary status, forced to adapt or become irrelevant. "This isn't just about individual hunters," Kethvar realized. "You're reshaping the entire galactic ecosystem. We're taking our natural place in it, Dr. Pezin," Chen corrected. "Humans evolved to be apex predators. That doesn't change just because we encountered other species. If anything, it means we need to be more effective at what we do." She paused, her gaze meeting his with steady intensity. "The question is whether you want to adapt to the new reality or remain stuck in the old one."
Kethvar considered his options.
He could return to his previous hunting grounds, continue pursuing the same prey with the same techniques, and maintain his existing reputation among species who didn't know about humanity. Or he could accept that the universe had become a much more dangerous and complex place, and learn how to survive in it. "If I accept your offer," he said slowly, "what happens to my reputation? My status as the galaxy's premier hunter?" "You trade a false title for real education," Dr. Chen replied. "The choice is whether you prefer to be the best hunter in a small pond or a competent hunter in an ocean." The metaphor crystallized his decision. Everything he thought he'd understood about hunting, about predation, about his place in the galactic ecosystem, had been based on incomplete information. He could cling to that incomplete understanding and remain forever limited by it, or he could learn what it really meant to hunt in a universe where humans existed. "When do we begin?" he asked. Dr. Chen's smile this time was genuinely pleased rather than unsettling. "We already have. The fact that you're asking the right questions means you're ready to learn the right answers." As she began bringing up new educational displays, Kethvar realized that his conversation with Dr. Chen had been more than a demonstration or negotiation. It had been his first lesson in human hunting techniques, specifically how to hunt someone's preconceptions and assumptions until they voluntarily abandoned them. He had been outmaneuvered by a master, and for the first time in 50 years he was genuinely excited to learn something new. The galaxy's former premier hunter was about to discover what it really meant to hunt in a universe where humanity had taken its natural place at the top of the food chain.